Hello, and welcome to all of the newcomers to the Poison Pen and to those tuning in virtually. We are delighted to have with us one of my favorite authors, Scarlett St. Clair. Oh. And just when I thought I could not love her more, I discovered she has a library background, and we'll get into that. So she gets bonus points for that. Before we begin, let's see. The format for the program is pretty basic. I have some questions for Scarlett. We'll allow some time for questions from the audience and any virtual questions. The signing follows. When you purchased your books, you should have gotten a signing ticket. We will go by numbers. I'm going to say this now because I will forget if I wait till the end. Scarlett's been on tour. She's been doing a lot of signings, so she's happy to do your name or personalizations and her signature, but we're asking that you don't ask her to do more than that just because her fingers are about to fall off from all the books she's signed. But now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Scarlett St. Clair.
Yay. Thank you.
My first question for you is, as a reader, I'm always fascinated by who the author was before they started publishing. So imagine you are a literary superhero. What is your origin story?
This is so interesting. I grew up in Eufaula, Oklahoma, and I was a very poor kid. And I remember the moment my life changed, and it was after I read The Lord of the Rings. And I realized it was so interesting. It was like this whole world opened up to me, and I realized that I could write fantasy, but in addition to that, like I could aspire to be more than just like, you know, a poor kid. And I didn't know anything really beyond that. And all of a sudden I wanted to be a famous author. I had to be famous. It was not going to be, I would not take no for an answer. And I wanted to travel, and it just changed the course of my life. And then after that, every decision I made was centered around being an author. And no one could tell me no. No one could tell me I was never going to do it. So I graduated from high school there. I'm a Gates Millennium Scholar, so I got to go to school for free. Thank God I wouldn't have been able to make it out of my hometown if I hadn't. And that scholarship changes a lot of people's lives. And it's moved over toward a fund called Native Forward. So if you're interested in donating, that's a very good fund to donate to. It changes a lot of kids' lives, a lot of Native kids' lives. And then I went to school at OU, and I majored in English writing, and I think that helped me become a better author. And then library science, which is such a passion. Libraries are such a passion for me, and librarianship changed my life as well. And it made me look at how readers seek information differently, and I used that approach in publishing as well, because I was self-published before all of this. But I got popular as a self-published author, and then got to do really amazing things. So that's a very small version of my life story.
What can you tell us about your new book, The Queen of Myth and Monsters?
I feel like it's a part of my feminist agenda to take over the world. Let's snap for that. Yeah, it was very interesting. I thought from the very beginning, I'm very dedicated to the matriarch. I think it has a lot to do with my roots in the Native community, and I thought it's so interesting. I started reading books about how the patriarchy rose to power, and it's so disheartening. And I thought, how do you take down the patriarchy? And so that's written into this world. Because the other side of that, right, is talking about how women have power, and that's part of this book as well. And we have power in the ways that everyone tries to take it away from us, like the power of intuition, which is always spot on, but people tell us it's too emotional. You can't make decisions with your emotions, and I think that's a form of taking away our power, and that's what Queen of Myth and Monsters is all about, is how we take back our power. And it will continue in book 3. There is a book 3. Why would I leave it like that? I know. Everyone will ask me, like, is Malice the last book? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes, I am a terrible person. I ended it there.
You usually have a vague idea about where your book is going when you start, but I read somewhere that Queen of Myth and Monsters completely took you by surprise.
I imagine you can tell if you've read it. It took me by surprise. So I realized I kept trying to put it in this direction that I thought it was going. And I had to backtrack because I couldn't move forward. And that's when I knew I was doing the wrong thing. And then when I started doing the right thing, I knew it because I could write it. But I hated it. And it's so interesting. I love it. I do love it. But I also am like, God, this journey sucks for all of us involved. And I think that well, I think readers don't realize that authors feel very similarly, right? Like we can write something that we disagree with or that we kind of hate having to do. But it works, and I think I know where, I do know where the third book is going. And just remember that I like to write happily ever afters, so stay with me. It was very shocking, and that I usually don't vary my writing process very much, but this was very intuitive, I think. So probably because I was writing about the power of women's intuition.
Okay. You've also referenced Queen of Myth and Monsters as the book in which everyone gets their backstory.
It's so true, though. I can make fun of myself. It's fine. It was so interesting because none of that came through, but I think it's because it was mostly, we had such, I like to say that my books, the first book is always romance forward, and then the subsequent books are fantasy forward. That's definitely the case for this one. The first book was such a love story, right? It was the end goal was to fall in love, right? This was not that goal in this story. And then everyone's backstory is so heartbreaking. And I think Anna's was probably the hardest for me to write. And I remember the headspace that I had to go into to do it. And the thing is that everyone had to have a backstory and a motive. And you had to understand it, or you weren't going to like any of these people. But by the end of it, I wanted you to question literally everyone. I mean, I wanted you to be like, who in the hell do I like? Like, and why do I like them? Like, what are their redeeming qualities? Very few things, but they live in such a world where there's no option for, there's no room for redeeming qualities, or you die.
That kind of leads.
You can quote me.
Our next question, because you really have the ability to create what you like to call morally gray characters.
What I like to call it. Are you saying they're evil?
No, they're complex, I think is what you would say. But can you talk about that process? Because I think I read somewhere that you said it's always a matter of perspective, and you were referencing Vlad the III.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at him from the people of Romania's viewpoint, he's one person. Outside, he's different.
Yeah, I think we all kind of grew up with, Vlad III being associated with Dracula, and the Romanian people hate that. And he's their national hero, right? So they see Dracula as sort of a caricature and sort of making fun of someone that they feel protected them. But outside of Romania, he was Vlad the Impaler. He did terrible things, but he, in that time frame, he did what he had to do to protect his people. And I think that's so intriguing. And he has a legacy that is in the form of Dracula, and sort of is a caricature that we still make movies about. And that's just fascinating to me. I've been fascinated with the question of morality since I was in high school. My first books were about, I was so such an intellectual. Not really. No, I just thought I think that anyone can fight for their side if you believe in it, right? Like, people form cults all the time, and I have a cult, but it's the cult of Scarlett, and people rally around it. It's a message that people rally around, right? So you can believe in anything, and you can fight for anything. And that was the same concept here. Is I thought, what gets people into that framework, into that mindset. And I always hope I do it well. I don't know if you know what I mean? I'm like, when I do like interviews and stuff, and people say, how do you manage to do this? I'm like, I have no clue. I just do things, and I hope it works. But I do think it starts that curiosity. And then I like to look at history, like, where are there examples of this kind of behavior? But Vlad III is a perfect example of it, because there's a story I'll tell you. that I thought was, and I don't know if this is true or not. I found like these folk tales from, and one is about Vlad III, and he had this lover, and she had beautiful braids, this long blonde braid, and you know, the people around the area were like very angry at him, so they took their anger out on her and cut her braid, and he killed them all. And I was like, that's such an Adrian move, right? But you know, I think in it's interesting with this thing around dark romance. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but it's fine. I'll get to. We have this tendency in dark romance to, you know, we really love our morally great characters and we'll ignore little hints about them. And Adrian's always said that, you know, he kills who he kills, you know, and he does not exclude anyone. And I think we're willing to ignore that in favor of being like, oh my God, he's so hot. And I'm like. And so I was like, you guys don't understand. He's a terrible person. It was interesting in KBB what people were willing to ignore in favor of the love story, and what QMM, they're like, what the fuck? I thought he was hot, like, you know. So I always want to be like, I'm not stupid. It's very intentional. But we will get to the happily ever after. I just think there has to be, we have a lot of things going on with the goddesses, and they have a lot of influence, and that doesn't excuse Adrian's behavior. And I think that's going to be the interesting part about how he has to get to the point where he's redeemed. And how do you do that? How can you redeem yourself for all the terrible things you've done? And I know the answer. But, you know, it's like, but here's the thing. He has to redeem himself in readers' eyes, right? So I have to write a character that you can forgive. How do you do that, right? I'm asking myself that question too. I'm like, why did you do this to yourself? I don't know. I ask myself that all the time. But I'm like begging you, like, stay with me. I swear I can do this.
You mentioned women, and throughout this series, there's the kind of the empowerment of women, the interest in witches. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a little witchy, if you can't tell. So I started reading this book. If you watch any of my lives, you probably heard about Witch by Lisa Lester, and it talks about this concept of women and how, like, we are all witches, and we're all empowered, and the idea of like being virginal is like not about not having sex. It's about being sure of yourself, being confident in yourself. And when society takes that away, right, then you're virginal because you don't have confidence in yourself. And you can see it in society, like when women start to embrace like their sensuality, society wants to take them down, but they still want us to be sexual. And I get really tired of all the double standards. Which is why I'm kind of abrasive to some people, and I'm very direct, and and it causes a lot of people to be like, I don't know if I like this, and so I explore that a lot with Isolde, but I think I just got on this like bandwagon of like, there's a book called When God Was a Woman, and it talks about the story of Adam and Eve and how, like, that concept was so man-made, and it put women in a position to be submissive. And it's because people are afraid of our power. And so what do you do when you're afraid of power, right? You oppress. So you make childbirth into a punishment, when in a matriarch, it is a sacred thing. You are giving life. Why would we make that into a punishment? Why would we make the continual evolution of our society into a punishment? Without women, we don't exist as a world. How the fuck do you populate a world without women? It doesn't make sense to me. How do you oppress the people who keep your society going? So I'm so angry about it. And I think you can see it in Queen of Myth and Monsters. The whole point of this book is like kind of an angry love like letter like to women to like stand up and like see your power. And at the end, Isolde gets it. She gets it. So it's going to be interesting in book 3 to see where she goes. But yeah, it came from a lot of anger. Just so much anger built up about, how we're treated in society.
I'm sure what was going on in the real world probably.
Yeah, yes, it was. It fueled a lot of, it's so disheartening to be in a world where, like, how are we in 2022 and we're still discussing how women should have children. Like, you're literally taking away our options, and you're saying, well, you have to have children no matter how old you are. You know, if you're 10 and you somehow fall pregnant, you still have to have that child, even if it's not your choice. But also, you know, you're a bad person for having sex, but also, you know, it's such double standard. I don't understand. Why are we doing this? Tell me why, where it makes sense. I don't get it. And it shocks me when women in power continue to make these decisions for us. Shocking. Like, how could you do that to, you had children. How could you do that to us? It just shocks me. And, you know, I I feel like when I write books, I can put my thoughts and my anger into it and make it make sense, you know, like make my thoughts on it make sense. So when I write books, I'm trying to process how I see the world and how I understand the world. And then I'm trying to figure out, like, if I, you know, living in this world, how am I going to change it? And I think as an author, what I can do is help you recognize your power. And if you're willing to read it and willing to look at it, you know, I write romance, yes. I write sex scenes. I write spicy sex scenes. But there's a lot of power for women in sex. And I think that people think there isn't, because we are a Christian-based society and we've corrupted sex for women. And we've made it. This girl is over here. I don't know who you are, but I feel like you're worshiping me right now, and I'm here for it. So I feel like there's so many layers to this book, and it's more than just, you know, and I hate even saying more than just romance, because romance has empowered women for years. It's just been made fun of in mainstream media to the point that where, you know, before you were introduced to romance, you probably said something like, oh, all the plots are the same, or there's no plot in romance, or they're all the same books, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's a tool to work against you so you don't find your empowerment. Like, fuck. And we all fell for it for so long. So let's not fall for it anymore. Huge tangent.
No, it's important that you say that. Let's talk a little bit about world building, because you really excel at that.
Thank you.
In Queen of Myth and Monsters and King of Blood and Battle. Did I get that right? Battle and Blood. Battle and Blood. This series was influenced by the myths and legends of Romania, Germany, Russia. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at those different world culture myths and then kind of make your own world?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always try to honor the source material, and the importance of it's such a big deal to me, especially even with Greek myths, because people worship those gods still, and those gods are very real. So when they message me and say, like, you really represented this god the way that I see them and the way that they talk to me, I'm like, oh my God, so amazing, you know. But I really wanted to heavily inspire on Romanian culture, because that is kind of where so you have to root your stories into something familiar. So vampires are very familiar with Romania, right? So that's the first thread. But then I found this book, it's the Encyclopedia of Vampiric Mythology, and she talked about how vampires are a manifestation of every culture's fears. So things that we consider to be a vampire may not be vampires in other cultures. And so I sort of thought, oh, that's a thread. Cool. So what in this society do people fear? Well, we all know it's women, but so we just I kept kind of going with that thread. But there's so many precious things about Romanian culture, and one of them is they have gates around their villages, and they close the doors at night so spirits can't get in. And I really related to that as, from my heritage, because I believe in spirits, and the owls in the owl in KBB, I fucking hate owls. I'm sorry. They're omens of death in my culture. And and when I see one, I pray, because it's a thing. In fact, I'm so afraid of owls. We'll have to turn it around. You should not have pointed it out to me. How dare you? I know. It's so much to the point that the person who did my book trailer for KBB put an owl in it. I said, I love it so much, but can you take the owl out? And it was a really cool shot. I was like, can it be a falcon instead? It was an owl. And then I stayed at an Airbnb with an owl on and I took it down. I had to take the picture down. it couldn't look at me. So when I say it's very real. So I loved those things because I can relate to those things in my own culture. But then in QMM there is a festival. It's I think it's been so long since it's been 4 months since I wrote this book, Winter's Eve or something, and it's based off the Night of the Wolf in Romania, which celebrates St. Anthony, and it's the night where magic is believed to be the most powerful. And I thought, how beautiful is that? Because I think we have a tendency to not believe in magic in the society, and so I was like, I want to take that and kind of pay homage to it. And I have a friend in Romania, Mary. She does I don't know if some of you guys saw the foiled bookmark that was she did the art for that. And I said, does this have any religious significance because of St. Anthony? And she said, no, you could use it, but I didn't. So I always make sure in my author's note to let you guys know, always read my author's note, please, to make sure you know where those sources come from. But they just have a lot of those beautiful gems, that I think you can fold into a world that you've created and still honor their culture. And Romanians' culture is so rich, and it's so cool to watch people from Romania message me and say, oh my God, I've never read a fantasy book based on my culture. And that's such a beautiful thing to me because it means I did it right. And I think, we see a lot of people do things wrong unintentionally or intentionally. And so it's such a blessing when I hear that it's made them happy or changed their life or whatever. So I just read a bunch of stuff and it floats in my head all the time. And then someday it ends up in a world that I create.
Was St. Andrew's Eve, is that kind of synonymous with Halloween or All Hallows Eve?
No, it's not. It's not even. It's. There are wolves involved, and it's like the night. It had there were two kind of versions of it, but one was like something about wolves will chase you, something I can't remember. I don't want to misquote, but it involved wolves, and wolves are Adrian's symbol, which is how I got started on that in the beginning. So that was it felt more Christmassy to me, but I think it's more like an the winter solstice. So we would just pass that, we just passed that. So, but I wonder if anyone had any wolves out and about.
Actually, up in North Scottsdale, coyotes come from the reservation.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Lots of coyotes in Oklahoma.
It might surprise people, but you do write another series. Can you talk a little bit about that for people who may not be familiar with your new Greece books?
Yeah, I write a Hades and Persephone retelling. And there's there's Persephone's point of view and Hades' point of view, and a lot of people are like, do I have to read Hades' point of view? And I'm like, yes. Thank you. It has a completely different plot, which is so fun because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it if it was going to be the same book. That's boring for me. It's boring for y'all. But it came from my love of Greek mythology, and I took a lot of Greek mythology classes in college. I'd always loved mythology, but I really found a love of it when I read the Aeneid. And again, I think it's so interesting in mythology. These women are put in they're goddesses. They have the ultimate power, and even they are oppressed by gods. And I was like, that's annoying. So what can we do to change it? And then New Greece was kind of inspired. And I can't write I don't like to write in real ancient times or the modern world. I always have to adapt it into something that's my own, which is why I decided to do New Greece. But the reason we talked about this earlier, the reason I modernized it was because I saw so many parallels to modern culture. And he said, Apollo was like Harvey Weinstein. And I said, that's the comparison I use all the time. That's am I wrong? Where's the lie? Yeah. So, yes. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to write it in modern times to sort of see how we haven't changed as a society. But I also think that myths are created to explain the world around us. And if we can write a myth retelling to explain the world around us, can we not kind of change it to empower us as well? And Persephone's journey is definitely one for personal empowerment for me. So anytime people say they don't like her, I say, well, you don't like me. And if you're my fan, you have to like me. And, I think we've all, had experiences like Persephone. We've all been young and not really known how to navigate life. And depending on what background you've come from, you'll relate to her or you won't.
Let's switch gears a little and talk about your writing process or lack thereof.
Yeah.
You have said, I have it written down for you, writing a book is so much more than putting words on a page. Can you kind of expand on that?
Where did you get all of these things I had said?
I'm a librarian, or I used to be, so.
That's fair. I so appreciate when people do their research because it makes these interviews so fun, and you've made this so fun. So writing is in my soul, and I think I've always been called to write. And even before, when I was 13 and I decided to do this, I would always feel, hey, it didn't break. Yeah. You're going to get something great. It's me. Right, yeah, maybe. Just, all of you pray for me that I get on my flight tomorrow and make it to Washington and then make it home on Christmas Eve. Yes, I lost my train of thought.
Writing is more of the...
I would feel like so pulled to write, and I would pull out pieces of paper and practice my handwriting because I wasn't sure what I wanted to write. And prior to reading fantasy, I had always read mysteries. Like, I was a huge Lois Duncan fan, and I loved. Yes,
Hallway?
Yeah, down a long dark. Yeah, and Killing Mr. Griffin, which is so dark about killing a teacher. But I loved it so much. And I do think I have a little bit of horror in kind of all my novels. But and so I always felt pulled to write. So I always felt like I never had a choice. This had to be what I was going to do. And I wanted to change lives. And I always said, I don't think I ever thought I could change lives writing romance, but I can, and I do it every day, and it shocks me, and it's the greatest blessing, and it's also, it's kind of scary because it's a huge burden, but it's just in my soul. And when people talk about it as if it's just about making money, I can't do it. It's not about that for me. It's so much more than that, and it's it's a way for me to like process my trauma. And then I find so many people who have been through the same things. And I think that's what this is about. And it's going to be interesting to see where we are in a year, but I hope a lot of healing takes place. And I want to change the world so badly. I want to change the face of romance. I want so many things for so many of, my readers. And I think that's it's just this ultimate goal of changing lives. That's why it's so important to me to keep writing, even when I don't want to. And I'm like, why the hell did you decide to do this? It's so fucking hard. And so I don't know if I'm supposed to cuss. I didn't ask you for permission earlier. I'm sorry. It just comes out.
It means we'll go viral.
And it's hard to put it into words because it means so much to me. And I've wanted to do this my whole life. And to have my words mean something to people is like, I can't process it. It doesn't sink in. It's like, it's a complete dream. Thank you. So it's a big deal.
There's been a lot of talk in publishing over the last decade about literary brands for better or for worse. For those that have not read your books, how would you describe your literary brand?
I have this conversation all the time because I don't know. I really don't know. My comps are always, I talked about comps a lot because I think there's a danger to doing comp books, to saying like, this book, if you like so-and-so, you'll like so-and-so. So people do that with me. They say, if you like Sarah J. Maas and JLA, you'll like Scarlett St. Clair. And I disagree. But I'm a librarian, and I think people need to change the way they comp books. I think you need to say, if you like this list of things, you'll like this book, because you can all read Sarah J. Maas, but you're all going to pick something out that you really love about that book. So if someone tells you I'm like Sarah J. Maas, you're going to pick that thing you love about that book and say, oh, that's in this book. It's probably not in my book. So I think there's such a danger in that. And I wish we could peel away like all these expectations we put upon books and just let them speak for themselves. And we don't do that enough. And, you know, and TikTok is a wonderful thing, but it also sort of inspires this sort of toxic space around reading. And I'm a librarian, remember, first and foremost. And I think that discourages people from reading, from discovering books. I think the most toxic thing that ever happened was all of the publicity around Twilight. That book got everyone into reading. It got so many people reading. I don't care what you think about it. I don't care what you think about 50 Shades of Grey. It got people reading. That is so fucking important to our society. I have readers today because they read Twilight and they read 50 Shades of Grey, and then you shamed them on a huge level, and you made them afraid to say what they loved. That is ridiculous. I can't, it's unforgivable. I'm very passionate about a few topics, as you can tell.
I didn't think I could like you anymore, but I already do, because what you're describing is Reader's Advisory.
It is. I love Reader's Advisory, yes. and it is such a skill, and people take it and they just, and I've thought about doing TikToks about how to conduct Reader's Advisory because it's such a passion of mine. And when people ask you, like, you know, none of you will be inclined to do this because you all came to my talk and you've heard me say this. But people like, what do librarians do? Just check out books? Absolutely not. There's such a science. It's called library science for a reason. We do a lot of research on information-seeking behaviors. We do a lot of research on children's literacy. The amount of research, the amount of outcomes-based programming we do for children to help improve their literacy, especially in, you know, underserved areas where even the schools don't have funds, right? None of you will value the library as much as you should. But yeah, it's Reader's Advisory, and it's really important. And I hear it all the time. Parents will have their kids, and their kids will pick out a book, and the parent will go, oh, you won't like that. How do you know? You don't know. We have conversations all the time among librarians about how should we let kids, like, or not really in public libraries, you can read whatever you want. If your parent's not with you and you pick from the adult section, I'm not telling you no. But, you know, are there advantages to reading above your age? And I think teenagers are very intelligent and they know what they're reading and they will skip it. I was the teen advisory volunteer leader, and I talk to teens all the time about what do you do when you read a book that you think is too old for you? They're like, I just skip it. They do, because we don't give them enough credit for being smart. Yeah, so librarianship is very close to me, and I think when we kind of get into this space where we make reading toxic, it's just like, what's the point? Why are we judging people for what they read? What is that thing on TikTok that they say, I'm not yucking someone's yum? If you have to say it, if you have to start out your video by saying I'm not doing that, you sure as fuck are doing it. So maybe you should stop talking. So I have strong opinions about this. It is.
My question that I'm always interested in is, you're a published author now. What has surprised you the most about the business of publishing now that you're here?
Can I say this? It's not going to be good.
Should we turn off the cameras?
No. I just think, you know, I think publishing is a business at the end of the day, and it's so disheartening because I'm about you know, the passion of readers, and I will come down to it again. And I think maybe librarianship really influenced how I view publishing and my readers, and it's all about what you guys want. And I don't think the publishing industry listens enough. And I think, you know, I think it's frustrating to them that indie authors are doing so well because they didn't pick us. And there used to be a huge stigma around self-publishing. You know, if you had to self-publish, you weren't good enough. That is not true. And if any of you are trying to be authors in here, let me tell you, if you get rejected by the industry, it's not because you aren't good enough. It's because they don't know what to do with you. And when something doesn't fit in their box, they're going to kick it out. The other thing that irritates me about publishing is how they pretend to be so diverse and they're so fucking whitewashed they can't even see it. It's like you have to have diversity from the ground up. And until you do that, you're not going to be able to be diverse. It makes me so angry. I had to have a conversation about why Isolde can be on the like why her hands can be brown, and the conversation around it was like from two white women, and I was like, I'm not going to have this conversation with you.
But do you think romance has become better compared to 10
Romance
years
has
ago?
always been a step ahead in diversity. I agree. I think romance has always done it well. I think everyone else sucks at it. So it's very frustrating, and it's, I mean, you can see this all the time on Twitter. White authors will talk about their advances versus BIPOC authors, way low, and that's now after you've had this like diversity in publishing movement for how long? Like when it serves you, that's what the answer is. So I hate that kind of thing. I don't like anything disingenuine. And I think overwhelmingly the publishing industry is disingenuine. And I say it all the time, and that's probably why I'm very honest. Can you tell? I'm like so honest about it. But I mean, even the New York Times, it's just a list that, pretentious people have decided to curate, and it's not about bestsellers, even though they've led the public to think it's all about bestsellers. It's not. Go look at Publishers Weekly and look at the units that we move. It's not about that. It's not about that. So there's a lot of issues in it. It's an old system. It's an old white boy system, and it has to change. But until the infrastructure changes, there's nothing, to be done about it.
Well, there's one way people can change it by buying more copies of your book.
Yeah, I want to. I think I'm kind of sussing out how I want to change it, and I think I can be some sort of change in that industry. I'm just trying to figure out what it's going to look like, because it can't look like an old system. It's not. Everyone says open your own publishing company. It can't be that. It can't be. That can't be the answer, because that's just doing what everyone else does. It has to be something else. And so as I'm learning what it's like to be in the indie world and what it's like to be in the traditional world, I'm sort of figuring out what I want to do, but I will change it.
I believe you. Let's go ahead and take some questions, because I know people are going to want to get their books signed. So any questions from the audience for Scarlett? Lady there. Yep.
When it comes to like this past year, a lot of authors have come out and said that writing like diverse characters don't make a lot of money.
This irritates me so much. I think I think I'm an example of that. That's a lie people tell themselves. And the other problem I have with that is the publishing industry says there are statistics that show that books with people of color on the front don't sell as well. And I think, okay, we have a lot of things going on here. First of all, socioeconomic status. Are you getting these books into the hands of people who would buy them, or are you getting them into the libraries where they need to be? I think your statistics are skewed, and I think it's an excuse, so you don't have to do it. But yeah, I mean, how are we going to change that quote unquote statistic if we just stop doing it? And I think it's a lie. I think it's just a lie people are telling themselves. I don't know. I mean, what do you think? How do you feel about it? Do you think it's a lie? I don't either. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. Yeah.
I don't understand why it's hard for certain authors to write things
Mm-hmm.
by pop characters.
It's fear. I think it is. I think it is, and I think it is. It's. I think it's a lot of fear. It's like, even if I do try, am I still going to fail? But, you know, we have to do a lot of things that make us uncomfortable so we can grow. I have a very unique perspective on it because I present white, but I'm part of the Muskogee Nation. And so the way I do this is that I fold in my experiences of what it's like to be in my skin. And, you know, because I don't like Sherman Alexie, but he wrote Diary of a Part-Time Indian, which explains exactly what it's like to be someone like me. And, you know, from one side, you're not Native enough. And from the other side, it's like, what are you? You have to be mixed with something, right? But I think it's so simple to make these things normative. And it's so simple to include the LGBTQ plus community in your books and make it normative. Because it's not like, oh my God, you're gay. It's just like, yeah, you're gay. It's just what happens. It's who you are. It's beautiful. It's the same with like, oh, you're black. Yeah, it's your skin. I think that's what's cool about Isolde is like, I wanted a character who I feel very, there are times I feel very uncomfortable in my skin, in my community. So I'm not brown enough. I'm not even brown, fucking white. I'm white as fuck. And there's a lot of privilege that comes with that, right? But people ignore, like, there is a socioeconomic level, like, experience to being Native that we all experience. There's health issues that we all experience being Native people. But it's easy, like, it's nice to have someone who can just be brown in their world and no one points it out. No one says, oh yeah, you're brown and it's a problem. Like, you know, it's not, and I think that's kind of what I wanted to do with Isolde. And then the experiences she goes through with her people are experiences that I've had with my people. And it's a very emotional journey and it's very hard to write. But you just have to be willing to do it. And I don't know, I can't speak for other authors. I can just speak for myself, but I do think it is a lot of fear. That's not an excuse. It's a terrible excuse. You've got to do things that make you afraid. But I hope people start changing their approach to it. I think they get scared when they're asked. I'm asked this. Why did you write about a brown woman? So I just explain why I do it. You know? And I can learn from those conversations too. I'm not afraid of them.
Other questions? You've stunned them into silence.
Are you afraid of me?
That woman there.
If you can take one book and make a
Of mine?
Oh,
A movie or a TV show?
TV.
Hey, it's her question. I would rather A Touch of Darkness be a TV show, because I think it would be really cool to have, like, to show Haiti's side as well. I told them you can't option one without the other. I see KBB as an anime, but it would be. Can y'all imagine? So I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I can't imagine. It's very interesting. I can't imagine it any other way. So if KBB was to be optioned first, I would be shocked. I would be like, but it's interesting. I'm wondering if A Touch of Darkness, the French will get a hold of A Touch of Darkness before America will, because the French are die-hard. When I tell you guys, the French are die-hard fans of A Touch of Darkness. It blows my mind. And I have never felt like a celebrity before as I did, like, there. I tried to leave and they. Like I have a French exchange student and she's like, I want a picture. And I was like, sure, it's a family picture. So we took it and then they kept pulling me aside. All these French people started lining up to get pictures with me. And I was like, I have to leave. So it would be interesting. But which one would you see as a TV show? Which one would you want to see as a movie? Do you watch anime? I don't know why I see it as an anime.
So well spoken and passionate that I can
Thank you.
just see something produced from.
I have said, like, I think people might be afraid to touch me because I would be so loud about my readership. Oh no, and they don't do that in Hollywood. But that's why I think it would be to my benefit to see it go do really well in France, and then I have the leverage to say, you know, that's how my brain works. Though I was indie for a long time. I had to do this myself. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Those were the there were some strict things I gave to my. I have someone who does shop around my rights. It's not an agent. It's very different. She represents TV writers. And I told her, like, there's no other option. Like, I would want to be named as a producer and a writer, which means I have to write on the script. So.
More questions?
So.
Isn't that like asking which is your favorite child if you're a
I
parent?
know. I'm like, what? Well, and it's like favorite heartbreaker, favorite funny, favorite. God, I don't know. I'm trying to also remember what I wrote. Why is this so hard?
You could just say all of them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard. You know, I'll tell you what I thought was hilarious though. When I wrote the Hermes like in leather shorts, I never thought anyone would latch onto that and take it where they've taken it. But it makes me laugh so hard. You know, I think it's always, I do a lot of mental gymnastics when I write emotional scenes, because I always look at, part of my editing process is going through and being like, how can I make this more emotional? And so any of those scenes that you felt like a pang or like, why do I have to read this? Is kind of, those are, I felt those emotions. I'm going to ruminate on that, and then when you come up in my line, I'll have an answer for you. Hopefully I'll have one that fast.
I think that lady there. Lady in black.
I think it's you. I think so. I guess. I don't know.
Sure.
The question would be, what would you say your book is? The series. Well, if you had to give it a taste.
Which one? Which series? I was like, blood. It tastes like blood.
You could do it like Cabernet or something.
I do. I love Cabernet. Okay. It tastes like my favorite wine. Yeah. I my first gut instinct was like Hades and Persephone, because all Hades drinks is whiskey. And it was really funny because my editor was like, he's not had any water. And I said, shut up. He is a god. He doesn't need it. Yeah. But it's kind of a joke. I know. I don't know if you guys know this, but I do like to make fun of myself in my books, and so I just think that's fucking hilarious. And then we had a joke in A Game of Fate. I don't know. I'm gonna say this. It's fine. You guys are all adults here, right? I was like, we should turn it into a drinking game, like the number of times Hades says cock, and it's like 36 in this game. So now it's a game with my readers where they always like do a search in a game of Retribution. I don't remember how many are in there, but and then in A Game of Fate too. This is a little off topic, but in A Game of Fate there's a chapter called For Your Pleasure, a montage, and it's just a chapter. It's like one huge sex montage, and I thought that was fucking hilarious because in movies there's always a sex montage. And I don't know if anyone gets it, but I feel so clever. And so I like to throw things in like that are just like really fun. You had a second question.
Do you have any advice for people that think that they
Want to do this? Are you writing right now? Okay, step one is done then. Well, I didn't know what I was doing either when I first started, and I think back on that time because I remember just my head hurting so bad trying to, because there's a quote about, I forget who says it, but like all writing is sitting down at your, computer or typewriter and bleeding on the page. Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. And it is very difficult. And sometimes, you can sit down at a computer and you can stare at one sentence for 2 hours. And I still do that. It doesn't go away. The hard part does not go away. But the point is that you don't give up, right? I say this all the time. This is in my soul. I can't stop doing it. So I always tell writers, like, you're going to have to find a way to yes. And we had that saying in the library, find a way to yes, because you'll get told no a lot, or you'll get told by people like, there's no money in writing, you shouldn't do it. But it's never been about money, right? It's been about changing the world. So you just have to keep doing it. And if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, find resources that help you feel like you know what you're doing. The first book that helped me write, I feel like the beginning of my book better was the first 50 pages. It's called The First 50 Pages. And it was so hilarious. It was When Stars Come Out, actually, my YA book. And I remember using it to like help me kind of guide me through the first 50 pages. And then I kind of got stuck, and I looked at where I was, and I had hit page 50. So that helped. It got me to page 50. And then I have a highlight on my Instagram where I give books and suggestions and stuff. You've got to find like your like book, kind of like your writing Bible. Mine was John Truby, John Truby's Anatomy of Story. A lot of people like Save the Cat. I could not read Save the Cat. So just find your literary Bible, and it will help you feel more grounded in your work. But you don't do this without help. And I think sometimes as writers, we think we're solitary creatures and we have to do it alone, but you can't. You can't improve your writing without help. You can't just stay in your hole and write. You've got to actually let people read it every now and then. Not too many though, because you can't have too many people. Every single one of you in here has a different impression of my work. And if I had gotten all of your feedback, I wouldn't know what the fuck to do. Only give it to a few people, one or two. Take their feedback to heart, but leave what doesn't serve you, because you're the person who knows the story. Yeah. You are cracking me up over here. I just need you to come with me on tour.
Other questions?
Yeah.
I think there's someone way in the back.
Way in the back. Hi. I can. Yeah. Oh, no, I want a graphic novel. I want KBB to be a graphic novel. And so our reason for that is that we wanted to sort of test how many of you demand a graphic novel. And then, so sometimes I have to, try to find ways to gather statistics. And so that was sort of what we were trying to do, is see how many people would say like, hey, I want a graphic novel. And then we could move forth with it. Because what we had tried to do, it's something Sourcebooks hasn't done before. And so we had tried to kind of do it completely. And when it really wasn't panning out, because people weren't taking us seriously is what was happening, we thought, oh, we'll just try it this way. So we'll see. I have only heard people try to process their emotions about QMM and nothing about the graphic novel. So it might fail, but we'll see. I'm glad that you love it. It's actually drawn by my editor's husband. And I thought, yeah, I know. And he was so adorable doing it. And he made her copies, her pre-order copies hadn't come in. So he made her go out and buy 2 yesterday so he could see it. I will, because he thinks he didn't.
Other questions? Any virtual questions, Patrick?
Well, I'm saying, yeah. But I mean, I honestly, in truth, I won't know until I write it. And I know that's kind of stupid for people, like they don't like that. But my editor, she's like, 3 Scarlett. And I'm like, no, I don't know. So I thought Queen of Myth and Monsters was going to be longer, but again, I think I didn't know anything about this book like I thought I knew about this book. But in order for it to be longer, it would have a really robust part 2. So where I thought it was going to end, not where it ended, which is not unusual for me. I usually know where everything ends. So I don't know. I said I have a third. I have the title. I have the cover. But we'll see. I'll let you know. Pending. Yeah, everyone is, right?
Last chance for questions. One last question.
Yeah. And okay, so what I did, and I love my readers so much, and so that's why I do those funny things in A Touch of Darkness, because they're so diehard, and I think it's funny, and I can only get away with that, and I can get away with it now because I was such a successful self-published author that you can't tell me no now as a traditionally published author, because there are a lot of things that go into A Touch of Darkness and A Game of Fate, that I probably wouldn't have gotten away with if I had been just traditional. So I'm glad I wasn't. But yeah, so what I started to do, I think I went into survival mode this year, and I didn't really realize it until the end. And I don't want to lose the joy I have for this because it's my passion. So I started writing a grim retelling that I've been teasing on Instagram a lot, and it's so fucking fun. And I found my love for just this again. And can I tell them? Okay. Sure. I've got to tell you about it because I haven't talked about it very much. But the main character is, her name's Gisela, and so. And the main man, his name is Casimir, but he's an elven prince, and he's so dumb, but he's so he's also really hot, right? And he's a stereotype kind of ish. But they live in this enchanted forest, and it is called the Enchanted Forest because it's a grim retelling, And so he needs Gisela to fall in love with him. So he has this mortal prince imprisoned in his dungeon for stealing a flower from his garden, as you do. And he goes to him for love advice because clearly he's in love. And he gives the most stupid advice ever. And it's like the first thing he says is, "Tell her she's beautiful. Women love that." And of course it backfires in his face. So he goes back to him and he's like, "It didn't work." And then he's like, "Well, save her from danger. She'll fall in love with you then. She'll have no choice." Because grim retellings are like this, right? And so it plays really heavily on just the stupid tropes and fairy tales, and it ends up obviously not being any of those things that make them fall in love, but it's really rough getting there, and so I'm just having so much fun with it. But on the flip side, I can hear all the people who don't understand me in my head going "This doesn't make any sense, it's so dumb, the magic system is non-existent." But magic is not everything happens in grim fairy tales for no reason. There's no explanation, and that's kind of how this world works. But I've had so much fun, and I missed that. So my goal going into Gods and Chaos, because I'm writing those back to back at the beginning of the year, is to have fun and to recapture that joy I had. It's not that QMM is not joyous by any means, but it was very rough and I couldn't focus. And I think I have some OCD tendencies that kind of tie in with my anxiety, so I can't focus. So by the time I get to a point where it's I have no choice but to write, I'm writing 100K in a month and I'm dying. And I don't want to do that again. So my goal is to just remember why I started doing this. And part of it is so I can fangirl with all of you. And that is my favorite thing, So
I think that's a perfect place to end. Before we go, we do have some giveaways.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.